Saint Alban. Long years ago, when Rome was mistress of the world, and her soldiers and citizens were to be found everywhere, even the little island of Britain had its place among the colonies of the great empire. Here the Romans laid their roads and planted their towns, built temples to their gods, and ruled the barbarians with a strong, firm hand. Many noble Roman families lived in Britain in those days, and although the life was ruder and rougher than that they were accustomed to in the wonderful city of Rome, still they made their houses as luxurious and comfortable as they could, and tried to be content. It was in one of these well-built houses, with inlaid floors and marble baths, that the little Alban was born, heir to a great Roman family. The parents had settled in the town of Verulam, on the banks of the little river Ver, but they always looked upon Britain as a land of exile, and planned to send their boy back to Rome as soon as he should be old enough to be taught and trained to be a Roman citizen. But the child himself was very happy in his island home. The little stream that ran past the town was in his eyes a wonderful river which would carry his boats far out to sea. The green hill on the opposite bank was a playground fit for the gods, with its carpet of golden-eyed daisies and yellow buttercups, and the smooth grassy slopes that were so soft to roll upon. The great forest that looked so dark and gloomy held him spellbound, and he loved to watch the gray mists come rolling over the marshy land, turning everything into a world of mystery. Never was there a happier child in all the world, but the reason of his happiness was not because he had so many pleasures, but because he was kind and generous to everyone around him. It seemed as if there was a little singing bird in the golden cage of his heart, a bird that was always singing happy songs, and its name was Unselfishness. Now as soon as the boy grew old enough, he was sent away to Rome, as his parents had planned, for they wished him to learn many things which he could never be taught in the little island of Britain. It seemed to Alban as if he had come to a different world when first he entered the city of Rome. Accustomed as he was to the little town with its few well-built houses, the rude huts and wild marsh wastes, the rolling mists and gray skies, he had never dreamed of such a city as this. Palaces of white marble triumphantly rearing their columns up to heaven, temples of the gods more beautiful than a dream, baths luxurious as those of a king's dwelling, and above all the blue sky, such a blue as he had never even dreamed of, and sunshine, which kept him even warmer than his fur coat had ever done. There was much to learn and much to do in this new world of wonder and magnificence, but as Alban grew into a man, he found that there was something he loved better than all this splendor and luxury. Far away on the banks of the little river, in the island of the mist and gray skies, there was something which bound his heart with a golden thread of love and memory, which nothing could snap. Although the house at Verulam was no grand palace, although the country was rough and wild, and often cold and bleak, it was home. The great forests, the green, flowery hills, the rolling mists seemed to be calling him. It meant home to him, and he loved it better than all the glory of Rome. So Alban returned to the island of the mists, and lived once more in the house where he was born, on the banks of the little river. He was rich and powerful, and had everything that heart could desire, and he was as happy as ever, for he was so kind and generous that everyone loved him. Rich and poor alike were welcome at his house, and no one who needed help asked for it in vain. Travelers always stopped at his gate, and he never refused hospitality to any guest. It was late one night, when doors were barred and everyone had gone to rest, that a knocking was heard at the outer gate. It was an urgent knocking, although not very loud, and the servants at last went to see who it was that sought shelter at that unseemly hour. A weary-looking man, dressed in a long cloak, was standing there, and he begged that he might be taken in secretly and hidden from his pursuers, who were even now close at hand. The servants, knowing their master's will, brought him quickly in, and one went to his lord to tell him of the new arrival. "He hath a strange cloak, and seemeth to be a teacher, and one of those whom men call Christians," said the servant as he told his tale. "He saith that even now he is pursued and hath endured great persecutions." "See that he is made welcome," said Alban, "and that he is hidden secretly, and let no man prate of his presence here." The poor hunted man, who was indeed a Christian priest, was brought in and secretly hidden, as Alban had commanded, and for a while his pursuers sought for him in vain. Alban knew well how cruel were the tortures and punishments which these Christians endured, and he looked to find his guest stricken with terror and fear. But to his surprise, the priest's face was calm and even happy. "Art thou not afraid that thy persecutors may track thee here?" asked Alban curiously. "My master is stronger than they," answered the priest calmly. "He will protect me." "Who is thy master?" asked Alban wonderingly. "The Lord Christ," answered the priest. "That poor man who died the death of a criminal?" said Alban in a mocking voice. "The King of Heaven, who deigned to come to earth as a helpless child," answered the priest, "and who became man that he might teach us to be men." "And what reward dost thou receive for thy service to this king?" asked Alban, looking at the worn clothes, the weary, thin face of the man before him. "They who serve Christ have no thought of reward," answered the priest. "Their only thought is how much service they may offer their master. Stripes, persecutions, tortures, death, these are the rewards which his faithful soldiers gladly suffer, that they may be fit to call him Lord. Wilt thou listen to the story of my king?" "These are strange sayings of thine," said Alban, "but I will hear no more. 'Tis almost like a call to battle in my ears, and yet I know it is but foolishness. Be silent, I will have no more of thy idle talk." Disturbed and angry, Alban turned to go, but all that day the words he had heard rang in his ears. How royally was this king served by his followers! Who was he that could command such splendid service? He had heard of this God of the Christians, but had never troubled himself to learn what his life had been. Then, when night came, he lay sleeping. A dream was sent to him, a dream which told him the story of the king which he had refused to hear that day. He saw the man, crowned with the wreath of thorns. He saw the face of majesty and power, gazing so pitifully at the cruel throng who seized him and nailed him to the cross. He saw the body laid in the tomb, and then the figure of the living Christ ascending with great glory into heaven. And sweeping upwards, there followed a great multitude in white robes, following him who had conquered death, for whom they too had laid down their lives. Early next morning, Alban went to the secret chamber to seek the priest, and ask what that dream could mean. "God has been very gracious to thee, my son," answered the priest solemnly. "He has taught thee himself what thou didst refuse to hear from me." "Tell me more," said Alban humbly. "I will listen to every word that thou canst tell me now." With a glad heart, the priest told over again the story of his master's life, and Alban listened eagerly. Again the battle call sounded in his ears, and he longed to serve a master such as this. "But hast thou indeed counted the cost of such a service?" asked the teacher. "It is no pleasant service which he offers." "I seek no pleasant service," answered Alban. "A cruel death may be thy only reward," said the priest again. "Dost thou not repent the kindness which made thee harbor a Christian?" "Nay," replied Alban, "thou hast brought me life instead of death. I have never yet repented of one kind or merciful act which I have done to any man." Then the priest could no longer refuse to baptize the new soldier into the service of the king. But as they knelt in prayer together, the servants came hurriedly to the door, telling of a band of soldiers who had entered the courtyard, and demanded to search the house for the hidden fugitive. Alban sprang to his feet, and caught up the heavy cloak and cowl of the priest. "Quick, quick!" he cried. "Escape thou in my mantle, and I will stay here in thy place. They will scarce discover who I am, until thou hast escaped far away out of their reach." "How can I do this?" said the priest. "Thou wilt suffer in my stead." "'Tis my first call to arms," said Alban gladly. "Let me thus begin to serve the king." There was no time for words. The soldiers were at the door, but when they entered, there was but one cloaked figure there, and he showed no resistance, but quietly gave himself into their hands. The judge was in the temple sacrificing to his gods when they brought the fugitive Christian to receive his sentence. And when the cloak was thrown back and he saw the young Roman noble, he was doubly furious because he had been deceived. "Thou hast hidden a traitor in thy house, and well dost thou deserve to bear his punishment," he cried angrily. "Perhaps thou too art a Christian. Sacrifice at once to the gods, and beg for mercy." "It is as thou sayest. I am a Christian," answered Alban calmly. "I serve the King of Heaven, and will offer no sacrifice to thy false gods." There was a note of triumph in the voice of the young Roman, and the people wondered when they saw him standing there so fearless and triumphant. Did he not know what it meant to call himself a Christian? He was young and rich and powerful. All the pleasures of life, gay and alluring, lay spread out before him. All the great things which men strive after lay within his grasp, and yet he was choosing torture, dishonor, and death. The wondering why was echoed in every heart. But there was little time for wonder. The soldiers, by order of the judge, seized Alban and dragged him away to be tortured, and then he was led out to be executed in the arena on the opposite side of the river. All the inhabitants of the town came out to see the sight, and some looked on with pity, remembering the kindness they had received at the hands of the young Roman noble. Others again came out to mock. How gallant and happy he had always looked! There would surely be no smile on his face now. But when they pressed forward and caught sight of that pale young face, their mocking words were silenced, and a feeling of awe fell upon the crowd. Yes, the old happy look was still there, but there was something higher and purer added to it. A light of wondrous happiness seemed to shine forth, and the people as they looked felt as did those men who gazed upon St. Stephen. They saw his face, as it had been the face of an angel. Down to the little river they led him, but when they came to the bridge there was no room to pass, for the crowd was so great. The order was given to ford the river, but the legend tells us that before St. Alban could step down, the stream dried up, and he crossed over without so much as getting his feet wet. Then the old legend goes on to tell how the executioner, who watched this miracle from the opposite bank, was struck with fear and remorse. How could he put to death a man whom heaven itself so carefully guarded? He would not fight against the god of Alban, so he threw down his sword and refused to touch him. But Alban walked steadfastly on to the place of execution. Up the grassy slopes of the green hill he went, along the flowery path of scented thyme and golden-eyed daisies, where he had loved to play as a little lad. On this bright June day the hill was starred with flowers, and they seemed indeed a fitting carpet to spread beneath the feet of the first English martyr. There were other executioners ready to do the bidding of the governor, and there, on the green hillside, the first faithful English soldier in the noble army of martyrs laid down his life. A clear spring of water, it is said, sprang up to mark the spot where St. Alban was put to death, near the little town of Verulam, which now bears his name, but the miracle was scarcely needed. The memory that sprang from the life laid down in merciful kindness for another, in the service of the king, is a spring of living water that can never fail or be cut off.